Hello, and we hope that you all had a great break. And this this breakout session is sponsored by Leadient Biosciences, and we were able to get in some quality network time. And thank you for joining us at Track 1, Caring for Yourself and Others While Rare. This is the last track breakout session for the day, and my name is Robin DeLeon, and I'll be your host for today's session on Romance While Rare. As a reminder, this track is being live streamed, and I would like to welcome our remote attendees and remind everyone to download our mobile app to use our live Q&A feature. Relationships can be difficult no matter who you are, but having a rare disease may create unique challenges to navigate a new or existing relationship. And to help us explore this topic and share with us their experience is Caliegh Haber. Is it Haber or Haber? Okay, I'm sorry. Haber, founder of Fight to Breathe, and Bryan Takayama, CFO and COO of Fight to Breathe, and Seth Rotberg. They're spelled wrong. Rotberg. Is it It's Roth.
Rotberg?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're good.
Okay, we're good. He's co-founder and president of Our Odyssey, so let's welcome them up.
Awesome. Thank you, Robin. Ooh, gotta get used to this microphone thing. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for coming and joining us today. We are incredibly honored and privileged to be speaking with you all on this topic. We know how important it is to have a strong community of those around us that inform us on some of the key topics that a lot of people go through in these situations, and we are very excited to have the opportunity to pass along our knowledge and experience as well. So as Robin mentioned, we're here to talk about our relationships, and when Seth, Caliegh, and I first got on the phone together to talk about how we wanted to approach this, we really drew out these three key objectives that we want to accomplish with you today. So for starters, we want to discuss the challenges of romance with rare disease to provide a relatable platform for everyone that is here with us today. 2, we want to provide a raw and intimate and completely candid view into our experiences. And then lastly, we want to inspire everyone that is joining us today with rare disease to have confidence in themselves, not to be held back from pursuing romance. But before we dive into the presentation today, let's go ahead and kick off with a brief introduction. And Seth, let's go.
Hi, everyone. My name is Seth Rotberg. I am 5'8", brown hair, blue, wrong thing. I'm a patient advocate. I come from a family impacted by a rare disease known as Huntington's disease, which is like having ALS, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's all into one condition. When someone is diagnosed, their average lifespan is 10 to 20 years. My mom had it for 17 years, and each child of a parent has a 50-50 chance of inheriting it. So at the age of 20, I decided to go through genetic testing, tested positive. I am pre-symptomatic, but at one point, I am guaranteed to get the condition just like my mom unless there's an effective treatment or cure. And so I've been involved with the health community over 10 years and recently co-founded Our Odyssey to connect young adults impacted by a rare chronic condition to social emotional support in hope of improving quality of life.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Caliegh Haber-Takayama, and I'm married to Bryan. I was diagnosed with a rare genetic disease, cystic fibrosis, at birth. And I grew up very healthy, but at the age of 23, I was listed for a double lung transplant. I waited 2 years on the organ transplant list and received my double lung transplant in October 2015. However, a year after that, I went into organ rejection, and I just celebrated 1 year after post-second double lung transplant. In June 2018, I received that. And in between those 2 transplants, I met the love of my life. I got married, we went on a honeymoon, and now we're just getting back into normal living and trying to be healthy, do laundry, cook, and not get as much help as before, so yeah.
Awesome, and hey everybody, so my name is Bryan Takayama, better known as Caligh's husband. It's very cool to be in the position that I am in, because the first many years of my life, I did not know about many of the things that I do now, especially in this world. So after meeting Caliegh and really diving head first, I think it was 2 months after meeting her, she went into rejection. I truly learned a whole new side of myself and a whole new world, one that's focused on living every second to the fullest and doing everything in my power to ensure that not only I'm taking advantage of it, but my wife and everyone else we know are. So thank you guys for joining us today. We're doing this in a little bit of a different format than I think the other presentations have been. When we first got in the room to talk about it, we were going to break it up into like 15-minute components where we each said our piece, but as we began to discuss with our communities as well as with one another, we realized that it really all fits into kind of a framework, one that we're calling this rare relationship continuum, where you go from single to dating to becoming sick, and becoming dependent to then like returning to or transitioning to that of a new norm. And each of us on the stage here, we have our own individual experiences that we can provide at each stage. So we're gonna do it more of a conversation base where I will ask questions, they will ask me questions, and then with 15 minutes left in the day, we will turn it over to you guys to ask some questions. So starting off with single, Seth, given your specific situation, tell us a little bit about some of the insecurities and difficulties that you've had in this part of your life.
So 2 things kind of jumped to my mind when thinking about the challenges and insecurities. One is a fear of time. So even though, like I said, I'm pre-symptomatic, I'm guaranteed to develop Huntington's disease unless there's an effective treatment or cure. And so for me, I'm always feeling like I have to rush through things. I feel like I have to go from 0 to like 200 miles per hour real quick with any type of relationship. And with that, I tend to overthink it and tend to put a lot of pressure on myself to saying I need to settle down now versus trying to take a step back and look into focusing on today versus focusing too far ahead of time. The other aspect of that is feeling prejudged and potentially intimidating the person I may be going on a date with or getting into a relationship with. I say that because my story is pretty public. If you Google me, you'll find out that I've went through testing and I'm an open book, but I don't know going into a date how much that person knows. I don't know if they looked into what is Huntington's disease. I don't know how intimidating that is. I've had dates where I've told them about it and then never heard back from them. I've had dates where everything was great and they're like, well, this is too much for me and I don't know how to deal with it. And for me, I always think, okay, well, is this because of Huntington's disease or is it just we're not a good fit? And so that's kind of where my mindset goes when it comes to those insecurities, those challenges, and kind of overthinking the whole aspect of dating in general.
Have you experienced it where someone like came into the first date pre-Googling you?
Yeah, I actually had someone that said, hey, I Googled you and I actually watched, a talk you did and this is very scary. And I said, well, what are we still doing here then? But I mean, for me, it was just challenging because I knew the answers to what they were gonna ask, but I also was scared that they weren't gonna see me for who I am. They were looking at me for Huntington's disease. They were looking at all the research on that versus trying to better understand it and better understand me as a person.
Absolutely, thank you. Caliegh, what about you? What are some of the insecurities that you faced?
So unlike Seth, I actually don't feel that my disease rushes me into relationships. I also don't really know a certain timeline for my life. Cystic fibrosis is a progressive disease. I've already had 2 double lung transplants, like I said. Both of those transplants were uncertain, what the outcomes would be, and there is no cure for cystic fibrosis currently. My, challenges have really been bringing somebody else into my situation. So when I do go out on dates and I do meet somebody, for me it is kind of, do I want to bring this person into a life that they may not otherwise have to experience? Do they want to spend days in the hospital with me? Do they want to, be my caregiver? Do they want to skip out on things and make sacrifices? And that's really tough for me to allow somebody to do that and to be the cause of that, because it does create a lot of guilt for me. So that for me is always challenging. One of my insecurities is probably the same thing, but also just, really like how is this going to affect the person's life? I'm always thinking about that person and their future.
Fair. In both of your experiences in going on these dates and having these sometimes negative reactions, and I'm sure it has helped form what an ideal partner looks like. Seth, for you, what does an ideal partner look like, or what have you recognized you look for in them and hope to find?
So what I've learned a lot about dating is you can't look into that first date thinking, okay, this is my soulmate, this is the person I was supposed to marry. And that's kind of was my mindset for a long time. It's like, okay, this is the one. And I start thinking, okay, I'm going to share everything up front. And I still do share, a lot about my story, but I think when you share so much up front, that can be a little overwhelming for the other person. So kind of taking those baby steps. And one of my friends actually gave me the great analogy of thinking of dating kind of like job interviews. So like that first interview may not go as well, but you eventually continue to interview, continue to get better, and figure out what's that perfect match and finding that job that's going to make you happy. And similar to dating, that first match it may not be ideal, and that's okay. You have to learn about what your wants and needs are through your dating experiences. Personally, for me, one of the biggest wants and needs is finding someone who's going to potentially take care of me if I get sick. Like I said, my mom being sick for 17 years, I want someone that's like my dad who's going to be there for, a person that's going to be there for me throughout, what's the whole, you guys know the marrying thing, like sickness and health, right? Is that the thing? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that thing.
The vows, something like that. Yeah.
Something like that, right? But I think that's one of the biggest things I look for is someone that's going to say, yeah, I will be there for you no matter what. We're going to be there for each other. Someone that's compatible, someone that's going to thrive in life with me, and someone that's going to honestly make me forget about the whole rushing of time and kind of throw time out the window, because each moment with them is going to be very precious.
Absolutely. Caliegh?
Well, my perfect match would be this person.
Oh, that's unfair.
But in dating, I've never had a checklist. I've never really gone into it with expectations of somebody to be my caregiver. But really for me, it was kind of seeing how that person treats others. Do they show compassion? Do they show sympathy and empathy? Do they want to help people? Just people on the street, open the door for people. Signs like that maybe seem like common sense, or it may seem like somebody who's a gentleman, but in the long run, those gestures can evolve into somebody who can really give you care and be there in times when you're not going to be able to care for yourself. I want to ask you something I've never asked is, what was your perfect match when you were single dating, and how did that change when you met me who had a chronic disease and a
Sure.
illness?
So I wouldn't say that I really had a perfect match before you. And that's why they all didn't end well. What was really interesting is like the first many years of, I guess, post-college life and dating, it was, I would realize that my relationship would always take a back seat to my profession. And then when I met Caliegh, all of a sudden the only thing that was important in my mind was you. So I would say beforehand, I didn't have an ideal match, and I didn't know what I was really looking for. And then when you approached me that day at the bar at the wedding.
When he approached me at the bar at the wedding.
Point of contention in our relationship. Everything changed from that moment, and I think it was your zeal for life. It was you're experiencing some of the most difficult things that most people can ever imagine experiencing, and you're doing it at such a young age, and has happened so many times, and yet you still were so happy and still wanted to continue fighting on for everyone around you, and that was what was really important to me, was seeing that even though times are tough and times will get tough in the future, you still were holding on to positivity and happiness and joy for life. Anyways, we're talking about things that are not dealing with singles, so let's go ahead and click forward to dating. Based on all this, very similar to this discussion and something that I believe many people deal with often is the concept of disclosing information regarding your guys' specific diseases. And it is very, it's to each individual what they will end up doing, because it's your guys' situation. But what advice would you give to those in the audience that are single or entering the dating world about when to disclose, or how you typically approach it.
You want me to go first?
I don't care.
Cool, I'll do it. I think there's, as we all know, there's not really that ideal time. It's not like I go on that first date and I say, hi, I'm Seth, I just tested positive for Huntington's disease and there's no cure. Do you still want to go on a second date with me? Or do I wait, 6 months in when it gets more serious and have that, again, that fear of them saying, wow, this is way too much, I can't deal with this, I don't know how to deal with this, and kind of end things. And so my approach is actually the first part in some sense where, again, I'm an open book. It's part of my story. If I'm going to a conference or at an event and they say, what are you doing? I'm here for, the work I do. Well, how'd you get involved? And eventually it comes up talking about Huntington's disease. And I think it's important to have those conversations, to be able to be open with them and saying, yeah, this is what I have. This doesn't define who I am as a person. And this is really just important for you to, find someone that has that same passion, that same purpose, and the same values and qualities that you do in order to really find that compatibility. So again, I wish there was that ideal time saying, oh yeah, date 2.5 is when you should do it. But I really think it depends on how your comfort level, how comfortable you are sharing your personal information, and then just being honest with them and talking to them about it, and then saying, well, let's continue to get to know each other a little bit better.
Understanding there isn't like a perfect formula for it, do you think it is early on in the dating process, or is it when it becomes more serious a few months in? Do you get what I'm asking?
Yeah, and again, I think for me, it's earlier on, and like I said, because unfortunately I have friends who told them later on, and then it's like they've been pushed away. I've told people later on, and they're like, I don't know how to deal with this, and they don't want to deal with it, and in a way it's a blessing in disguise because that's not the person I was supposed to be with, and that's totally fine. But if you tell them earlier on, then you'll kind of maybe get an idea, get a sense of like, is this a good fit? Is this a good match for me?
Yeah. Caliegh, do you have a perspective?
So for me, it's always comes up. It's something, so with cystic fibrosis, I take enzymes when I eat, and I also give insulin when I eat. So, oftentimes when you're on a first date, you either get coffee, you get something to drink, you get food along the way, something like that. And so because I don't really feel like my disease is something to hide, I try to be confident in it, and I just go ahead and take my enzymes and take my insulin. Most people are gonna, see that and ask, oh, what are you doing? Why are you taking medicine? And so I'll simply say, oh, well, I have cystic fibrosis, and this just helps me digest my food. And I think that my approach in life and how I was raised was that my disease is not, doesn't really set limitations on me, or shouldn't. So if I'm confident as a person and I try to exhibit that and just say, like Seth said, like, this disease doesn't make me, then the person is really receptive. And then as far as disclosing more information, I think that if this person does care about you, does want to continue dating you, most of the time they are going to jump online now and do some detailed research. The more detailed, personally, probably the more they care, and they're going to come back with questions. And I'm always going to answer those questions as honestly as possible and not hold anything back, including the really tough parts, because you do want to know if that person can handle the situation, if they want to be there, because I don't think that it's fair for anybody with a disease or not to expect somebody to care for you and to be somebody that you can be dependent on. And so I leave that up to the person that I'm going to date to decide that for themselves.
Oh, very cool. And just to add on to a little bit about Kayla's point, because of our specific experience, we met at this wedding, and then I had to travel internationally for work. So the next month we were just texting a lot. And from day one, Caliegh was incredibly transparent with me, to the point to where she was just giving me information so I was aware of it and not worrying about how it may deter my responses or deter me from the relationship. And I can say that sort of transparency early on for me was incredibly important to prepare me for the 2 months later when she initially went into rejection, as well as to prepare me to know that I was going to be able to be a positive support in her life. So transparency is helpful at times. One of the other topics I wanted to touch on, and it's similar to one we touched on in single life, is some of the anxieties that you deal with when in the dating world. And Caliegh, you were telling me, and I wasn't aware of this yesterday, that one of yours is when your hospitalization is first going to happen in the dating life.
Yeah.
And talk to us a little bit more about that.
Well, for me, when I'm hospitalized, I usually end up hospitalized for a few days to a few weeks at a time. And so I never know if that hospitalization is going to happen the day after first date, the week after, a few months, but it's always bound to happen. I mean, even now, being that I'm much healthier, I still end up hospitalized. And that is really scary because you don't know if this person is going to be like freaked out about it, if they're going to want to visit you, if they're not going to want to talk to you anymore. And also just the fact of like you may meet somebody and then disappear for an entire month because you're sick, and then text them and be like, hey, what's up? And you're kind of like, they're like, well, where have you been for a month? And then you kind of have to say, well, there's this thing, and I was in the hospital. I was in a coma. It's not really a big deal, so it is really kind of weird for somebody who has never met somebody with disease before to go into that world and think about somebody who's in the hospital often.
Yeah, it could be one of those defining points, whether they get out early and it's good riddance, or it's they dive in head first and they really get to experience
Could
it.
I actually add something too?
Yeah.
Another insecurity of mine has always been when I'm dating somebody and the fact that I'm young, I'm still in my 20s, and people may want to go out a lot with friends, they may want to drink, they may want to go away and travel, and that's really tough because I usually can't do that, and so I have to stay behind, and that person's, going out constantly, and sometimes I feel like, why do they want to go out and spend time away from me when I'm sick on the couch? Like, how does that make sense? And I think over the years, I've slowly, and it's been really hard, I've trained my thought process of thinking that's not them wanting to be away from me and putting me not as a priority, but that's them, needing their independence and having friends as well. But it does show you who wants to be there for you and not. Do you ever deal with that, or have you before?
I mean, personally, just it is challenging. I think the opposite, because I'm not at that point yet. Mm-hmm. For me, it's I want to go out, but I'm also okay just hanging out and not going out, I guess. It's very different for me. I don't really experience that challenge yet. Mm-hmm. I think if I was to get that point, and I've seen it with my friends who have living with health conditions where they can't go out and do certain things that I'm doing, and part of me is do I stay back and help them out, or do I go spend more time when my mom was in a nursing facility, or do I go out with my friends? And I think those are tough things for me that I have to deal with. How do I disclose that also with someone I'm dating about, if I get to that stage, do I feel obligated to tell them they have to stay with me, or I don't want to pull them away from what they want to enjoy too. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, another topic that we wanted to touch on was the friends and family's influence on your experience in the dating realm. Seth, what are some of the things that come up with your friends and families when you're diving into a relationship?
So those are probably very different depending on who I'm talking to, for sure. With family, my aunts and uncles and some older friends, I've gotten time and time again when I was single, oh my God, Seth, you're so mature, and why aren't you married and dating? And I'm like, well, thanks. Do you have someone lined up for me? What's the deal? And in all honesty, I put more pressure on myself internally to feel like I have to be at that level, and I have to exceed to, impress other people. And what I've come to realize is I shouldn't hold myself to the expectations of what society wants. I need to hold my expectations to what I want in life and what my needs are. And then with some of my other good friends, they've actually been lifelines for me. I kid you not, calling them up, hey, I need advice. They're like, yep, I know, I'm here. I figured I was waiting for this call. And one of the biggest things I think they've taught me is the importance, which I'm sure you would understand, Bryan, as a guy in the relationship, is the importance of listening, right? And understanding and comprehending and not jumping to conclusions. And I think more recently, that's kind of where my friends have been very supportive, is just saying, like, listen, don't jump right away, take a step back, and process what's going on in the relationship, communicate with them, be honest with them, and then more importantly, I don't always have to talk about the health condition with them. I don't know if you guys ever felt that, where it's like it's constantly talking about the health condition, whether they want to know more about it or you want to share. It's like, well, let's separate that out. Let's kind of have those discussions of when we can talk about it and when we don't want to talk about it, and talk about what you're passionate about, because that's where you're going to find that compatibility and really build that chemistry. Because if you're talking about the same stuff over and over and over again, it's like, are we just meant to be there for some more support, or are we there because of that love and that compassion that we built up?
Absolutely. It's a lot of understanding that the health condition is there and things will happen when they're going to happen, but making sure that you're able to find love outside of it. Yeah, very cool.
So for you, how was it dating me and dating somebody who has a disease? How was it for you to tell your friends and your family at first that you like somebody, you want to date somebody, and eventually you wanted to marry somebody who you were going to have to take care of?
Yeah, I'm pretty hard-headed, and everybody knows that, knows me. So everybody had their opinion and had their advice, and a lot of friends, or some friends were like very hesitant and concerned, and others were like, this is classic Bryan, diving headfirst into something that he doesn't have any control over and trying to make the best out of the situation.
I feel you on that, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my parents from a very young age, I've kind of taken control over my own life and started working when I was 12, 4 jobs by 16, et cetera, just because I didn't want them to pay for my things. So when they tried to have like a say in Caligh's and my relationship, I just kindly let them know, like, your opinion is very, very well received, but I've thought about this and I understand what I'm getting myself into. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. But I knew that Caliegh was someone who was going to be there for me, and she had an incredibly strong family who has been there every step of the way for her and would help coach me through it. So my friends and family all had their say, and they will always stay there as strong advisors, but they are there to provide advice. Yeah. That's it. Cool. Anything else that you guys want to touch on in the realm of dating before we get on to some tough subjects?
I'm going to address real quick the speed of dating. For me, again, I mentioned this earlier, but one thing that I've also noticed is that, when you live with a health condition, you don't know how long it's going to impact you. You don't know, how much time per se you have left. And on top of that, when I start seeing a lot of my friends getting into serious relationships, engaged, married, kids, that's something that I want too, and I want to have enough time to have that. Because unfortunately, when my mom was sick, I lost out on all those memories, with her. And I don't want to have a family that may lose out on those memories with me. And so that's something that I've always thought about, is like, how much time do I really have? But then I also have taken a step back again to reflect and say, well, if I plan my future so far ahead, am I really going to enjoy what I have today and what I have tomorrow? And that's something we have to remind ourselves of. It's like, I could plan everything for the next 10, 15 years, and something could happen to me tomorrow, and then what? And then I got to figure out everything else from there on out. So, it is important to be able to plan stuff, because having those real hard conversations are important, but I think it's also bring yourself back to the moment, living in today, and also not trying to compare yourself to our quote unquote normal friends, because they're not going through similar situations that we are as people living with health conditions.
Yeah. Would you say it's understanding what your ultimate goals are, but knowing that the journey is very flexible?
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, it's at the end of the day, when you want to sit down and talk about, caregiving or end-of-life care, great, have those conversations when you build that stronger relationship up, but you don't need to throw it all at them right away, and you also don't need to make it into a life or death situation. If you don't tell me right now, I can't be with you. It's let's just live and enjoy.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit about having trust in your partner. If you guys have gotten to that point as well, they have to be they will develop the understanding that is a potential inevitability, and they will grow and mature into that as well. It's not something that just you have to flip a switch and say you're ready for now.
And then I'll just add something. I think I touched on it, but just in case I didn't, dating really is about confidence and what you exude and the energy you give people. So I really want everybody in this room to try to find the things that they are confident about, because with disease, we have so many, insecurities about the way we look, the way we feel, how we live, our job, everything like that. Many of us, don't have jobs, and it can be really intimidating when you meet people who are your age but have succeeded, or are more successful than you. And success is measured in so many different ways. So don't go into it and just feel like I'm not good enough, because you are, and you will find somebody who builds you up and makes you believe that you are like the best thing in the world. So, date and have fun, and don't put pressure on it, and just love yourself, and someone will love you back.
Absolutely. And one of the things that you've always been very positive about on your social media platform is your body image and being okay with your scars. Do you have any advice or anything that you would pass on to anybody that also might have those sorts of, that have scars and things along those lines?
There are those quotes like, your scars are your battle wounds, and they show you that you were stronger and you were strong enough to get over the things that were supposed to destroy you. And I totally believe that, but think about, other than the physical appearance, like every time I look at a scar, I think about the memories and how I got those scars, and it really was the journey into those surgeries and what I had to overcome. And that has bonded me with my family and with my friends, and shown me who I am, and kind of like formed me into the person I am. So try to look at yourself and see those scars not as ugly, but as something that makes you different. And I think we all know now that like being different is a total positive thing, because we don't all want to be clones of each other. We want to stand out, and our scars make us stand out. And sometimes they're conversation starter, sometimes, they're just for us to look at in the mirror, but try to envision yourself as like this really strong person, because we really are. And I hope that you all, think about yourselves like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, so the next topic that we wanted to touch on is the concept of getting sick and becoming dependent. It's a very difficult journey for both the person going through it, but as well as the partner. So, and it comes with a lot of very, very difficult conversations. Cool. 10 minutes means we have 30 minutes left in the presentation.
Oh, what?
So Caliegh,
Sorry,
inside joke.
Move on.
So you've been healthy. You've gotten really sick. You've gotten for a double lung transplant, become healthy again, gotten really sick again. Talk to us a bit about what it's like to go through being completely independent to being very dependent upon others.
That is the most challenging thing in life, to depend on others, and to feel like what you did before has been taken from you, whether it's like career or just living on your own or shopping or doing laundry, those things, and then all of a sudden you can't do anything. You almost feel like, prisoner to your disease, and that's really, really tough. But Bryan has shown me, through his love, that it's not a bad thing. It just means that we have to allow others to help us and be there for us. And then when we are healthy, then we can show those people, our thanks by doing those things again, and not only caring for ourselves, but caring for them and doing nice gestures for them. So, like I said, it's really hard, but I think it's just like, let me say this right. So it takes away our independence, but it lets us grow mentally, because we're able to see ourselves, as I don't know what I'm trying to say. Like, we're able to grow and not put ourselves down because of those dependencies, I guess.
for me, when she was starting to get very sick and on oxygen, and it was starting to become very difficult for her to even walk to the bathroom, she was still like fighting to do things like the dishes and laundry, like those stupid tasks that don't actually mean anything, but they were incredibly important for her to do them. It was a mental block. So I think what you're getting to is it was a very big stepping stone in our relationship when you started being okay with me doing them, because of the understanding that I didn't want you getting exhausted doing dishes so we could go on a walk outside later, and that was a huge growing part of the relationship. I think one of the things you were also about to touch on there was the concept of guilt. Talk to us a bit about like feeling guilty in this situation, and why that's okay, and why it's also good to get away from that.
Guilt is a hard thing for me. It's one of the most difficult, and I feel guilty because it means that that person isn't only caring for themselves. In my relationship, it was Bryan working full-time and spending full time at the hospital with me, engaged in my medical care, engaged in helping me walk, engaged in all of those things, and having to, provide for us financially. And that was really hard for me because there was nothing I could do. There really wasn't. It was out of my control. I couldn't work and I couldn't do these things for myself. So the guilt was really just putting that pressure on you to achieve all of those things and within the day, and not being like absolutely exhausted, because I saw how tired you were, and it just it was really, really hard for me to watch.
Sure. And I think the important thing that I would like to relay to her, as well as anybody else that has rare diseases, I never felt like I never wanted her to feel guilty, and there was absolutely no reason in my mind that she should feel I was there because I wanted to be there. And I think that's a really important thing for people with rare disease to understand, is if your partner is there and they're there because they want to be. So Seth, understanding that yours is more progressive and it's going to come a little bit down the road, how do you mentally prepare for what's to come in this situation?
Yeah, no, it's definitely tough to mentally prepare about that, and it's not that I want to be negative or pessimistic, because I definitely believe that there'll be hopefully an effective treatment or cure, but it's also about being realistic and having those tough conversations with your significant other. Like I said, family planning, life and health insurance, end-of-life care, even setting up a living will of what if this happens, how do I want to go about it? And I think that's what I'm trying to mentally prepare for, is being realistic down the line, having those conversations when it feels appropriate, and being open and honest, because those conversations aren't easy to have. It's not, something that it's a walk in the park and be like, yeah, let's talk about this, all these serious stuff. But when you become more serious in the relationship with someone, I think it's important to have those conversations and be realistic with each other, but also be honest with one another.
So, have you had those conversations? How have you facilitated that discussion?
To some extent, I've had that conversation before. It is tough because I don't think I've gotten to the nitty-gritty yet, because I haven't gotten to a serious relationship where it's hey, let's talk about we're engaged or we're married, or to that point. But these are things that are always in my head to think about. Even talking to friends and family about these things are very important. I've set up a living will, which I never even thought about before, because of thinking about what my future holds and who's going to be responsible of that living will. Is it my dad, is it my sister, is it that significant other, and to what point is it going to, be important to have these conversations?
Absolutely. Caliegh?
Those conversations are extremely important, and they definitely help your relationship grow. I know that when I went into rejection, I was really sick, and there were some days that I honestly did not know if I was going to make it through the night. And Bryan and I talked about it, and I had a living will, and my mom was my
executor.
What's it called again? I forgot. Anyway, she was the person who made the end-of-life decisions for me. But once we got into a really serious relationship, and Bryan was very involved, we got married, and I made that switch. And I think that it really, it showed like total trust in each other, and the fact that I could rely on him to basically know what I would want when I would be unable to talk. So, yeah.
And I don't actually think it was marriage was the switch. I think it was maybe 4 or 5 months after you got married is when you were finally ready for me to become the person that made those decisions. And it's not just marriage. I mean, the titles in a relationship are important, but not really in this situation. It took me having complete control or knowledge of her entire regimen, and then also understand having the discussions with her when she's sick or when she's in the hospital, and seeing if this situation happens, what do you want, and being able to have those sorts of discussions.
And because I had been in life or death situations before, and I had had my parents have to make those decisions for me because I've been in a coma and stuff, I went through literally every single circumstance that could ever happen to me and asked him like what he would do, and then we talked about what I wanted. And so we've talked, like hours and hours worth of conversations about this, and I think that is because basically like exactly what I would want, and in the end it's what I want and us as a couple and our future, but it's really like how far do I want to use extensive measures and stuff.
Yeah, very difficult discussions, and they're like things you never thought you'd have to discuss until you're 80 years old, and then it's challenging, but you also grow a lot as a couple in those situations. So understanding these are very difficult topics, let's talk about like positivity. So how do you stay positive in light of all of this?
Well, I'm staying, this is PG, right? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Oh, we can go as R-rated as we want.
I think what's important is, taking it day by day, reminding yourself of what your support looks like and those resources to get you through what's going to happen. Like I said, it's having those hard conversations. I mean, when I dove into Huntington's disease, I dove straight in, similar to what you said. You dive straight into something and you don't really look back. But it's kind of like coming up for a fresh, for a breath of air and saying, wait a sec, I need to take a step back, process everything, and have an opportunity to understand the needs and interests of my significant other as well. Because similar to Caliegh, I don't want to feel like that guilty person or feel like needy, because I do enjoy that, having someone there and having the companionship and compatibility, but I also want them to be able to do their thing. And so it's also understanding the boundaries and expectations in the relationship, starting those off from the beginning. So like you said, it's like, do I tell them right away about my next doctor's appointment? Are they there at the next doctor's appointment? Or do I wait until it gets more serious? Do I separate the social from the dating life at first? Maybe that's the way. But I think it's having those conversations and setting up the boundaries towards the beginning to get an idea of what one another's wants and needs are, so that you're not assuming that you know what it is, but you're having these conversations.
Definitely. Caliegh?
As far as the removing all boundaries, I'll go into that one. That is something that we have had to do. I lived in the hospital for 5.5 months while I waited for my second double lung transplant, and we were 24/7 in the hospital. And there were times when I literally could not get up to go to the bathroom, or couldn't really by myself, and Bryan had to help me, and it was really hard, but at the end of the day, it really brought us closer because, there were no doors closed, let's just say.
Literally.
Yeah.
That's cute.
You learn a lot about someone when you're in the hospital with them for 5.5 months.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I know we're actually running up on time a little bit. We want to give the audience time for questions. There was one more topic that we wanted to touch on, and this was returning to the new normal. Do we want to just spend 2 minutes?
Yeah, should I just say something?
Yeah.
Okay. Returning to new normal, this is really exciting and really awesome. I basically, the transition from caregiver back to relationship takes a bit of time. When you're in the hospital for a long time and that person basically is always talking about your health and what's the next steps and what to do next and all of these things, and then you go home, in our situation it was Bryan organizing the medicine, telling me when to take it, and just concentrating on drink more water, do this now, do this now. And we weren't really focusing on our relationship as partners and romantically. And so that transition was tough, but it was something that we literally had to like put in our heads of.
We had to have conversations
Yeah,
about it.
I had to tell them like, okay, you know, you
Back
need to
up.
back off a little bit because this is becoming like father-daughter type of thing. And now we need to think about like, let's go out on a date and not talk about this. And like, let's, you know, sit in bed together and watch a movie and like lights off and not, you know, think about this type of thing. So it really is changing your mind frame and thinking of that person again as like this romantic, sexy person who's, you know, you want to have like intimate relationships with versus just like, you know, sitting next to each other in the hospital all the time. So yeah.
No, it's so true. It was funny. Like the 5.5 months that she was in the hospital, I had to I wanted to maximize the amount of time that I had with Caliegh. And what that required was having a very detailed regimen for every single moment of the day to get there. And then when she got out of the hospital, my mindset was to continue doing that. And she was not on board with it. But it took like 4 weeks to get through it. But it was a very important lesson. It was in like, anyways, you said it all. Yeah.
Yeah, the one thing I'll add is a little bit about family planning. I know there's a whole session on that tomorrow, but I think it's just very important to know what your family planning options are and understanding, you know, the importance of educating yourself, finding the resources. But at the end of the day, you know, I thought originally it was adopting or, you know, having kids naturally, and then finding out about IVF, in vitro fertilization with pre-implementation genetic diagnosis, and then also learned about sperm donation. So if we have any sperm donors who want to help me out, raise your hand. Okay, I'll ask again, maybe 5 minutes. But it's really just about knowing what your options are out there and then just educating yourself about it as well. But again, there'll be a session on it tomorrow. Someone in the audience, her name's Taylor, who will be talking about it.
And then also knowing what the options are, but also what your partner wants.
Yep.
So, you know, one of the things I talked about with Bryan early on was, are you okay with adopting? I will not have children biologically myself. You know, we could do surrogacy or we could adopt. But are you okay with that? Because many times the person isn't. So it's just really good to know that you're on board and you have like the same mindset before you know, get too serious. And then it's kind of like, wait, what? So yeah. Anyways, I think we're up on time.
Yeah, so I mean, it looks like we have 12 minutes left. We'd love to open it up to anyone in the audience that has any questions for us.
Okay.
Rush through that last part, sorry guys.
How do you deal with when you don't present as sick and trying and having a person kind of deal with that? Like, and maybe Seth, you might have, this might be a better question for you. When you're not presenting as sick, like you're not necessarily in the hospital and you're dating, but you're trying to get across the seriousness of your disease.
Yeah, I think it's very important to still have those conversations because you're right. Like, if you're not presenting any physical symptoms or you're not in the hospital, it's just also important to have those conversations and being open and honest with them. Again, I think it's not what I want, it's what you want or what someone else wants of like how much you want to disclose. And I think having these conversations towards the beginning of those first couple dates are important because then you're going to get an idea of, is this the right person? Is this the right fit for me? But it's also how much information do you want to tell them? Do you want to start off by saying, here's my whole condition, you know, here's like the Wikipedia of it? Or do you want to just like slowly bring them into it? And that's kind of where I talk about the importance of, you know, talking about what you enjoy doing outside of your health condition and learning more about what they like doing outside of just, I guess, what they do for work. Because that's when you'll get an idea of like, oh yeah, we both like sports, or oh yeah, we listen to the same music, or we like to, you know, volunteer with elderly people. I do, so I don't know. But that's just kind of my thoughts is like being open and honest, having that communication is very important. especially earlier on in the relationship.
And also YOLO, like, just seize the moment. If you're not sick at the moment, just like do fun stuff. And don't think about health all the time too. But totally talk about it, but still no.
So how do you make sure that you're not just talking about medical stuff, especially if the other person's in the medical field and interested in the medical?
Yeah, well, it sounds like it's probably going to be a main topic of discussion if that's the situation. But to Seth's point, I feel like talk about it as much as you guys want and need to talk about it, but find passions and things that you enjoy outside of it. Like Caliegh was very open with me about everything before in the initial phases, and it was everything that had to do with her health condition and what she had gone through and what she could potentially go through. But it was also everything that she was passionate about. Like, she wanted to travel, she loved cooking, she loved spontaneity, those things. And so we would have the conversation about the medical stuff, but we would also find the connection outside of it. Not to repeat what you said.
Yeah, just to add to that, again, it's setting up those boundaries and expectations, right? Of like having these conversations. If you don't want to always talk about it, I think it's being open with them and saying, listen, like, I appreciate your curiosity or that you're interested in this, but let's talk about like things outside of this, because again, it's the whole idea of not being defined by your condition. And yeah, they might want to learn and be curious, but it's like, hey, maybe it's like we set a rule that on Sundays we don't talk about it. I think it's just trying to figure out what each person is okay with talking about, and if it's too much, having that conversation early on.
And also you could set up like fun dates, like let's learn something new together. Let's take a class once a month or once a week that is all focused on this one thing, like pottery or cooking. And so you're just not talking about health at all because your mind is so focused on like having fun and exciting and learning something.
Mm-hmm. Table topics.
Bryan, I'm coming at you, and I hope this isn't
Let's go.
unfair. And you really spoke to it, Caliegh. My husband, the boundaries have been removed. He has seen me hospitalized. He sees me do infusions every couple of weeks. And that's hard for me as a woman, sexuality-wise. This stuff affects marriages, and I think it's something we don't talk about a lot. So, Bryan, what advice would you give to a spouse? How do you silo the medical stuff and seeing Caliegh hospitalized and some of the things you've probably done to help her, but then also the marriage, the romance? What advice would you give to me supporting a spouse on how to do that?
Yeah, sure. And I mean, I don't think you're alone in your situation. We experience this a lot throughout our relationship, and it's always it comes up in conversation a lot. So I think it's a very valid question. And what has worked for me is I compartmentalize, and maybe that's not the healthiest. My profession has kind of taught me how to do that. But it's I understand when she's in the hospital, it's because we need to be in the hospital for us to have the time outside of it. And then it is very important for me outside of that to ensure that whatever we do is taking advantage of that to the most. Whether it's just a drive up to Malibu, or if it's just doing something fun or finding a new trip to go on. And then like finding those little things that you can do to like spice things up. For that cliche, but it's very much so. It's developing and defining that understanding that when you are in a situation where you, like in the hospital, or if she's getting her infusion, like it's because she's doing that, or she's doing that because that's necessary to have the moments outside of that.
How about to take it one step further and put you more on the spot? How about after seeing me in the hospital, and seeing me go to the bathroom and all of those things that no man ever wants to see a woman do?
Oh, that's fine. It's all good.
I think you kind of were getting to this. Yes. So how do you take your mind away from what you just saw and move it into seeing me or somebody, your significant other, as somebody that you want to have sexual relations with? How do you change that mind frame?
Well, I think it goes back to that same concept of like I compartmentalize it. I know hospital days are hospital days. Like if you're in the hospital, I'm probably going to see you go to the bathroom. It's what you need to do. But outside of it, no, I'm not going to go into the bathroom while you're going. I'm not going to.
You don't?
I do sometimes.
Don't lie.
It's just but it's in fun as opposed to in a very serious situation. It is that. I mean, she locked it the other day, and I taught her how to unlock the door while she was going. But no, it's very much it's compartmentalizing. It's I know what I'm likely to see in the hospital, and then I know what I'm not going to see outside of it, and then we do those fun things outside of it to change the frame, change the mindset, change the environment.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, good job. Oh, you guys did a really good job. My question is about how you were talking about, when to disclose, but I'm wondering about with people that have like visible physical disabilities or they have a visible illness, like how dating is different in that way, especially first dates. Mm-hmm. And obviously, if you guys can't talk about it, maybe you could talk about the experiences of your friends that you know in the community, or if anyone else in the audience even could give like some insight into that. Yeah.
Well, I have a lot of obvious scars, maybe not right now, but I mean, I have scar here, I have scars everywhere, and I think for me, it is something that people will, ask right away if they're interested, and can ask you, why do you have that scar, or what is this physical disability? And I think that personally, I'm just very open, and the person can kind of take it or leave it. Because if that person decides to get up and leave or not go out with you again, I mean, I don't know if I really want to see that person again anyways. So, the respect that people give to you is what personally I think we give back. So if somebody does care about you mentally and who you are as a person, it shouldn't matter. And I know that's like something that's easy to say, but you just gotta, for me, I just like put that in my mind and I try to hold on to it. And I think the more I believe in like positivity and hope and looking beyond my illness and without like limitations on myself, I think that other people will be receptive to that and view me as a person outside of my disease as well.
Thank you.
And just to add to that, I mean, I know with, I guess, more of the younger crowd per se, like the whole big idea of dating apps, not a fan of them, but people use them, it's all good. I think it's just remembering that it is scary to feel like you might be judged. It's scary to feel like they may look at you for your condition, but I think it's also, disclosing that if you are on the dating apps of, it may not be in your profile, but eventually when you're having that conversation, talking to them about it and explaining to them, what you're going through, or giving them, some educational content or a video just to look at so that they're aware of what it is, so that it's not trying to scare them away, it's just trying to be real with them and say, hey, this is how I feel, this is what I go through, I just want you to be open and honest about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
All right, so my question kind of goes into like the feelings that people have before they get into a relationship, because I know that I experienced a lot of feelings of feeling like I was unwantable, that I was someone that would be undesirable. I felt that why would someone want to have children with me? I have a hereditary disease. Someone would probably, look at me, or once they find out that I have a hereditary disease and that there's a likelihood of my child having this, that, why would they want to have a child with me? And those were large fears that I had. I was just wondering if, now that you are both in relationships and you guys have had those discussions with your significant others, like what kind of hindsight do you have now looking back onto those feelings that you have, and how were you surprised by your significant other when you got into the relationship with them? Does that make sense?
You guys go first.
Me? Medicine is so advanced these days, and there are so many ways to test genetics when you're having a child that maybe the child may have a genetic disease, but maybe not. And maybe you can test the embryos and put them back in you without a disease. But really, I think that if you are getting further along in the relationship and the person does love you, I think that they are more willing to love a child that also has that same disease and understand what they've gone through and kind of support them better, and you can support them as somebody who has that disease as well. But there's other options too, and it's really just having that discussion with the person and making sure that they're okay with adopting or not having a biological child or something like that. What do you think?
Did that answer your question?
I'm not sure.
What I was really getting to is, how were you potentially surprised by your significant other's ability to overlook those things and still be in a relationship? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And that, these fears that you may have had leading up to your relationship were maybe unfounded because your significant other was able to look past that and see it as not a huge deal or something that could work out.
Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, we assume a lot of times that they're gonna look at us for the health condition because it's ingrained in our minds sometimes to say, yeah, they're gonna, look at us for what we have, or, not feel like they can date us because of what we have, or not have kids with us because of that. But to overlook that and take it to that next step, it's about that trust. It's about building trust up with that significant other, understanding where you're both coming from, and then having these conversations with them. I mean, it's obviously an amazing feeling when they don't look at you for your condition and that they, love you unconditionally and you love them back unconditionally, and you guys can be there for one another. Yeah.
Okay, we have time for one more
Sorry,
question here.
I just want to touch on that one real quick from a partner's perspective. When Caliegh, something that I thought was super important to me my entire life was extending the Takayama legacy, was having that name be passed, or like that bloodline passed down. And then when I met Caliegh, and like 2 months in, she's like, by the way, that's not going to happen. It was a difficult thought at first, and I had the thought that was so important to me. But based on the relationship that we had already formed and how much I was just like infatuated and in love with her, it was something that I overcame super quickly. It was something that I thought was important actually wasn't important. What was what I had in here. So if that helps answer it all.
So I have a question about single life. Single life. You do have bad experiences. You do have dates that didn't go well. You do have relationships that ended. Like some of the questions that she had, I've actually been told that by people. So it's a legitimate fear now. So I guess I wanted to know, how do you get over bad experiences and keep yourself in the game and not say, oh, you know what, that happened before, it's probably going to happen again. Why bother? How do you not hold yourself back?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely tough, and I feel like your confidence level keeps going down and down, and then you keep thinking again, oh, it's because of my condition, it's because of my condition. But in reality, it's just that compatibility thing. And I know it takes a lot of patience and takes a lot of different dates, but maybe it's starting off with, again, understand what your wants and needs are, putting that out there. Maybe it's being honest and open with your friends and saying, this is what I'm looking for. Do you know of other people that are interested or who are looking to date? It's really just, not completely putting yourself out there on every single dating app. You don't have to do that, but it's really just like what you're comfortable sharing, and then talking to your friends about how they can help support you with what you're looking for. It is crappy. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like I've been on a bunch of dates that have gone terribly wrong, terribly bad, and it stinks. But I think at the end of the day, I learn from them and I reflect on them and I say, okay, well, now I know this is not the type of person I'm interested in, and this is the type of person I'm interested in. We can talk more about it after. I know that we're pretty much out of time, but
yeah. I was just gonna add one thing. So I had a relationship that I thought I was totally in love with this person, and it ended up being very overwhelming. As my disease progressed, it was at a time in my life where I went from really healthy to not so healthy, and the person did get overwhelmed and decided that the relationship just wasn't for him anymore. And that was like super devastating for me. And so I went into the next relationship and I was like, you know what, I'm just not gonna tell them that much. Like I can tell them I have CF, but I don't really want them to like come to the hospital. I don't really want them to be that involved. And that ended up like totally biting me in the butt because I went into the hospital, I got super sick, and he found out from a friend. And that was just like basically a deal breaker because how can you have a girlfriend that doesn't even tell you that they're that like sick to that extreme? And so then I've just kind of learned that I just need to be like organic with it and see what the person is receptive to and how they can be a support and go from there. And that's how you find out if that person is compatible with you or not.
And I think it's changing the frame. It's not that you weren't right for him, it's that he wasn't right for you. It's like,
Yeah.
So thank you, Caliegh, Bryan, and Seth, for sharing your experiences with us today. And at this time, we're going to have a short 15-minute break before heading into our closing session into the main ballroom. And we invite you to connect with our speakers, check out our back table for resources, and don't forget to let us know how we're doing by taking our quick survey on the mobile app.
And real quick, before everyone leaves, or at least those that want to stay, can everyone come up to the room a little? We want to do a little bit of selfie with everybody.
We're going to do like a room selfie.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Should we stand like on here and take it?
All right.
Thank you.
You ready?
stand on
You
the
doing
chair
it?
or-
Yeah.